So we're going to get started with cutting. You'll need silk material, 2-inch cross grain ribbon, scissors, measuring tape for this part. So right now, I'm just going to go ahead and get the material ready for me to cut. You want to try to find the finished edges. So those are the edges that are already finished by the manufacturer. So once I find that, I'm going to fold it over and match it together and just spread out the material. Okay. Once you have it nice and neat, kind of how you want it, we're going to cut the material. You want to cut the material, well, there are different sizes you can cut the material, but for the standard flags that we'll be making today, we're going to cut the material at 46 inches. So at Praise Dancers Rock, our regular flags are cut at, our standard flags are cut at 45 inches. So I cut it at 46 inches to allocate for any errors or anything that I may make. So 46 inches. All right. And then once you cut the first one, you can just pull up all the rest of the material and cut out another 46 inches. And just to mention something here, a good pair of scissors is good to have. If you have cheap scissors, it's just gonna kind of hurt you in the long run, especially if you start to making a whole bunch of flags. It'll be just harder to cut the material, even though it's fragile and silk. So now once we cut out 46 inches, I just go to the top and I cut through both of the material that I just made. I cut through it to make sure it's even on both sides. Okie dokie. So now we want to cut our GROSGRAIN ribbon. So our GROSGRAIN ribbon, I am using 3 inches. You can use 2 inches or 3-inch GROSGRAIN ribbon. I wouldn't recommend anything under 2 inches because it's gonna be hard to attach the rod if it's under that. So with the GROSGRAIN ribbon, we want to measure it out to 53 inches here. All right, we are ready to move to the next step. Okay, so now we want to sew the edges. So we sew the edges. I sew my edges with a serger. And so I'm going to show you how to sew the edges with a serger, and I'm going to show you how to sew the edges with a sewing machine if you don't have a serger. So with a serger, you'll just put it under the presser foot and just go ahead and run the material through. And I'm showing you, I'm just leaving like an inch off, so the serger will cut that inch off to make it the edges straight. And you want to be careful if you're using a serger not to pull at the top, just to use your hand to kind of guide the material through the presser foot. Okay, and once you're done, you just go ahead and cut off the excess thread. And I cut as I go. Some people cut after they finish, but you know, it's just a preference. All right, so now I'm going to show you how to, if you don't have a serger, how you can do this with a sewing machine. So I also have a Singer heavy duty sewing machine, so it might look the same, but it's not. So what you want to do is just kind of roll that or fold it in half, and you want to do that twice. Now you can definitely iron this down and it'll make it a little bit easier. You know, you won't have to keep it. You can iron it or you can pin it down. But for me, I typically don't use this method, so I didn't take the time to iron it down. You know, once you get it, you want to stick it under the presser foot there and start to sew. Okay, and as you sew, you'll have to keep folding the material over twice to keep that seam. All right. So if you're making flags just for your team or just for yourself or anything like that, I definitely wouldn't recommend going out and buying a serger. A good serger probably will cost you about, I guess, about $250 $350. Um, but if you're looking to make flags professionally, I would definitely recommend getting a serger. It will save your life if you're trying to do this professionally and you're making 10 flags a day or something like that, because doing it through a sewing machine is just gonna eat your time away. So definitely, if you want to make flags professionally, I would recommend getting a serger. But if not, then the sewing machine will do just fine. As you see, we're still sewing, so that'll tell you, how much time, a little bit, how much time it takes to do it with a serger versus a sewing machine. We're almost finished here. All right, and the same thing with the sewing machine. You want to cut off the ending thread at the top and at the bottom. And here's what it looks like. All right, and that's the difference between edges being sewn with a serger and edges being sewn with a sewing machine. Okay, and you want to make sure that you have sewn both sides of the flag that have the cut edges. So you don't have to sew the side of the flags that have the finished edges already by the manufacturer. You just want to make sure that you sew the sides that we cut. All right. So now we're going to the soaking and folding method. So you're going to need vinegar, silk material. You're also going to need your PVC pipe and rubber bands for this step. Although it's not pictured, that's what you'll need. So you are going to take the material out, unfold the material, I'm sorry, and you want the sewn edges together and you want the finished edges together. With the shibori method, you want the waves going long ways. So the waves will go from unfinished edge, not unfinished, but the sewn edges to sewn edges. Okay. So once you have that, and you'll have to excuse my taping, I didn't realize I was taping so low. Take your sewed edges and you want to fold the material in half. Okay. And once you fold it in half, you can lay it horizontally. You'll see me turn the flag horizontal. All right. And once it's horizontal, the sewed edges are on the side. You want to fold it over, lift up and fold again, and lift up and fold again. And you want to put the rubber bands on the edges, top and bottom. And once you have that complete, you want to soak it in the vinegar for 25 minutes. So it can soak longer than 25 minutes, but definitely I don't recommend that you soak it less than 25 minutes. So once that's done, you are going to actually wrap a PVC pipe. And this is called the shibori technique. And you can look it up, and the shibori technique just means that you're using patterns or using some type of abstract material to make a pattern. So that's all that means. So we're going to wring out the vinegar really good, and it's important to make sure that that's really good and wrung out well. And you'll see why we just use the rubber bands to keep the material together the way that we wanted it. And we want to start to wrap the PVC pipe. So I'll put some rubber bands around the material and the pipe to get it to stay together. And all we're going to do is just kind of twist roll this around the PVC pipe. And this PVC pipe you can get from Lowe's or Home Depot. It's like $1 and something. It's already cut. If it's not already cut, they can cut it for you. But it's like $1 and something. So it's not expensive at all. So you want to wrap it around, and once you wrap it around, you just want to push the material down. And I wrap it pretty tight. I like mine to be tight. And once you finish wrapping, you want to put rubber bands at the bottom and the top. It's not necessary to put rubber bands in the middle or anything like that. It's not going to make the flags look any differently. So just top and bottom is all you need. And I kind of tighten it up the way I want to, and I put some more material around the top and the bottom because when you put it in hot water later, the rubber bands tend to pop. So just put a little bit more security around the top and bottom of the PVC pipe and material. All right, so that's how it looks. So now we are going to dye. So for this step, you're going to need 2 gallons of water, a container, and I have a cereal storage container here. You're going to need 1 tablespoon of dye. You're going to need 1/4 cup of vinegar, and you're going to need 3 tablespoons of salt. So we'll just let that fill up. And I get the cereal storage container from Walmart. And if you don't want to go out and buy a material, any container that's big enough to hold this water, or sometimes I use just a cup, and it works fine. And so you want to get the water boiling, the vinegar and the salt. You want to put all that together and bring the water to a boil. And I personally don't add the dye until after the water is boiling. And I'm using turquoise dye, so there goes the dye. All right, so once it's done, you want to pour the mixture in your container. And you want to be careful. And I use gloves because it's hot, and then you're dealing with dyes and chemicals. So it's a good idea to use gloves here. And I have a spatula, so I'll just stir all of that just to make sure all the dye and everything just kind of is mixing together. And we are going to add our material very carefully in the hot water. And you want to be very careful here because sometimes the rubber bands can pop and water will spill out. So you just want to be careful to put that in there very slowly. And I let that sit for 6 minutes. So at 6 minutes, this is what it looks like. And again, sorry about the taping, guys. I was not aware that it was so low. I'll make sure I do it better next time. So that's about 6 minutes. So at 6 minutes, what I'll do is I'll just start to wring it out. And again, at this point, you want to make sure that you're wearing gloves. I wear latex gloves. That's because it works better than the disposable gloves that you buy. And so you want to begin to take the material off there. And you take the rubber bands off. You'll start to see it's looking pretty and colorful already. All right, so at this point, we want to take the material and we want to wrap it the other way. So same kind of thing that we did earlier, put the rubber bands at the top, but we'll begin to wrap it, we'll begin to reverse wrap it, so wrapping it the other way. And then put the rubber band at the end. Okay, scrunch it down in the water. Scrunch it down the PVC pipe. And then go ahead and we're going to dye it for another 3 minutes here. So just 3 minutes, not the whole 6 minutes. And if you wanted to dye it 2 different colors, this would be a good time. If you didn't want to do turquoise, again, you can just add another color and dye it another color at this phase, and that, you'll have 2 different colors in the flag. So through the magic of editing, that has been 3 whole extra minutes. So once you're finished, you want to get that out the way and go ahead and start to rinse your flag. And that's pretty heavy, so be careful with all of that hot water. And we'll begin to rinse the flag. And I leave it on the pole to rinse it at first. And you notice there's not a lot of dye running out or anything like that. If you have a lot of dye running out, that's an indicator that something's going wrong, or the dye is not dyeing the material. So if you have a lot of dye running out, then maybe you don't have enough vinegar, maybe you don't have enough salt, or maybe you don't have enough dye, or something is wrong. So a lot of dye running out is a bad sign. So, and I am rinsing in cold water. And some people, or some instructions may say, you know, wash with dish detergent or something like that. You can if you want to, if that's what you want to do. I don't. I just simply rinse it in cold water real well, and that works fine with me. So you just want to rinse it till it's good and rinsed out, because it will smell like vinegar. So rinse it really good with cold water to get that vinegar smell out. And wring it out really well. And there we go. So that's what it looks like after I finish washing. So now you want to go ahead and put it in the dryer, iron it, and that's going to be the finished looking product after I finished drying and ironing. So now we want to add the GROSGRAIN ribbon. So you're going to need a sewing machine, you're going to need ribbon, silk, scissors, and measuring tape for this part. So for me, attaching the ribbon and attaching the rod was the hardest part for me when I first started. So right now you're seeing that the material has a lot of static in it. And that's just probably from my dryer or something like that. So, but if you experience that, to make it easier, you can go ahead and, if you have something, a metal hanger or something, you can run metal over it to get the static out. But I didn't do it. So what you want to do is just line up the flags, line up the pattern on the flags to make sure, you know, it's on the right side and everything. So that's what you'll see me doing here. Just kind of lining up the patterns to make the flags match. All right, guys, and this would definitely go a lot easier if it wasn't so much static in the material. So you might, if you're making flags, you might want to go ahead and get that static out of there. And I wouldn't suggest using any of the, you know, the things that you throw in the dryer, the little static things, because they'll make the material soft, and it'll take out some of the sheen out of the silk. So once you have that, you want to make sure that you have the edges that will go together, because this is going to be the edges that the ribbon is attaching to. So you want to make sure that you're using the same edge for both flags. And it should be an edge that has been sewn. So not the finished edge, but an edge that has been sewn. So now we are going to attach the GROSGRAIN ribbon. So what I'm doing now is just evening out the top of that GROSGRAIN ribbon. You want to fold it over 2 inches. 2 inches. It can be more or less. It really can be more or less, but I personally just prefer to use 2 inches. It's just a preference. So once you fold it over, I fold it over again, so I won't have any rough edges. And I'll just sew that edge, so it's all just kind of nice and clean. And I'm using pink ribbon here in an attempt to, so you guys can see it better. And I'm cutting off the thread there. So here you go. So we have one side sewn. So now I want to take it and put it in the machine, and you'll see me attach the material halfway through that folded edge. So just halfway. So you don't want to put it at the top, and you don't want to put it at the bottom of that folded edge, but you want to put it right in the middle of that folded edge. And you want to start to sew. And you want to start sewing like 3/4 edges from the edge of the GROSGRAIN ribbon. So you don't want to make sure the material is not on that right at the edge, but just kind of a 3/4 edges over. And again, here you can pin the material if you want to keep from having to adjust it or something like that. But typically I just go ahead and just sew it through. But it's just a preference. If you want to pin it, then that's fine. And I hope you guys can see how I left space on the edges. So you don't want to put the material on the edge of the ribbon. Okay. Okay, and once you get to the end of the ribbon, the end of the material, you want to kind of do the same thing. You want to make sure you want to do 2 inches folded over. 2 inches folded over, because you don't want a huge space at the edge of your flag. You don't want this huge handle at the edge of your flag. Or if you do, then just leave it. But I can kind of eyeball it here, so I know that's a little bit more than 2 inches folded over, so I'm going to cut it off. And this is just me getting the measuring tape out to kind of see where 2 inches, where I'm thinking 2 inches might be. So it's about up here, so I'm going to cut that off. Okay. All right, so same thing as before. We want to roll that over, and you can roll it over the material. That's perfectly fine. If you roll it over the material, you don't want to roll it under the material. And you can just thread that on through. All right. So you can sew a seam there, but you know it's kind of a preference. If you want a seam there, you can sew one there, but it's not necessary. Okay, so now we are going to fold the material over. And you want to take some time to make sure that it's perfectly matched. Make sure that it's perfectly folded over. You totally can iron this down if you want to, be a perfectionist. You can totally iron it down. But for me, I just kind of fold it over and make sure that it matches on both sides. And you want to make sure that the thread goes over. You threaded it once, so you want to make sure that the thread is on the left side. This seam that is on the left side of the seam that you already did. Okay. and you want to make sure that the material is kind of straight in everything, and you'll get it once if you're sewing. You'll kind of see where you need to straighten the material out, make sure it's not gathered in the fold or anything like that. And again, you're sewing the second seam on the left side of the seam that you already sewn. And we want to keep going, again, making sure none of the material gathers or anything like that. You want everything to kind of be straightened out. All right, so we are finishing up, and I did just a little reverse stitch there, and we're gonna go ahead and cut off the excess material. And all right, and of course we do this with both flags or both sets of material. You want to do this with both of them. And once you are finished sewing the seams, you want to put a seam across the top. Yeah, and just cut off the excess thread there. All right. So now we want to add the rods. So we are using flexi rods. I use the 0.125 by 44 inches. You'll need some gloves. You'll need some sewing machine, the silk material that we have been working with, and you may need stitcher-witchery if you don't have a sewing machine. So if you ordered a kit, the stitcher-witchery is in your kit, and you'll see what that looks like a little later in the video. All right, so we are about to put the rod caps on the rods. So if you're working with flexi rods, you want to make sure that you are using gloves. And I would suggest some latex gloves if you're working with the flexi rods, because flexi rods are flexi glass and they will irritate your skin. So you don't want to rub on it, or if you handle it with your hands, I would not recommend it at all, because it will, kind of scratch your skin a little bit, and it's irritating. So definitely wear gloves while handling flexi rods. So what I'm doing is just putting the caps on the end of the flexi rods. Okay, so we should have one side that is sewn, and we should have one side that is open. One side that is sewn and one side is open. So we want to find the side that is open. So those who got the kit, so this one side is sewn and one side is open. The side that was open had the red um, ribbon around it. So that was the indicator to tell you what side was open. So it should be a red ribbon tied around it. So that would be the side is open. So we went ahead, and again, sorry about the taping, guys. I will have to get better with that and make sure that I'm taping high enough. So we just inserted the flexi rod in one of the flags, and we'll go ahead and insert in the other one. This is a very easy step. You just insert it in there and it goes. All nice and beautiful. Yay, almost finished. All right, so now we want to go ahead and sew the edges or stitchery the edges. So I'm going to show you how to sew the edges first, and it's a really simple step. All we do is run the sewing machine, run a seam towards the end. So you want to make sure that the rod is out the way. Do not sew the rod. Make sure it's out the way. It should be just material. And you're going to just run a seam through there and you're done. And I'm just cutting the thread off here. And you are finished with that flag. Okay, so now if you don't have a sewing machine at home and you're using the kit, here is the stitchery. It should have been in one of the Ziploc bags. So you just want to take the white backing off of the stitchery. And you can get stitchery from Walmart or any craft store or anything like that. So that's what it looked like, and this is what you want right here. And this part you will stick in the edge of the flag. So I noticed it was too big, so I'm just cutting it down. And you stick it in there like so. And once you stick it in there, all you have to do is iron it. Just iron it for about, I say press it for about 30 seconds and it will seal the end of the flags for you. All right, everybody, that is it. That is how you make and dye silk worship flag. So that's just me out in my backyard flagging because I'm so excited that I finished taping this course for you